communication is nearly impossible. I'm going to talk to you about why that is, but the fact that we can understand each other at all is like a miracle. And when I tell you and I explain to you like why this is so true, you're going to understand like basically how complicated it is and why we miss each other all the time. Why we miss each other. We think we know what we're talking about. We think we know what the other person said. We think we understand what's happening in a situation, and that's not what's happening. And so I'm gonna kind of go through this thing, and then I'm gonna be asking for a few volunteers. So I hope there's some people in here who are willing to jump up on stage with me and do a few things. I promise I won't embarrass you. It's just about demonstrating some things about communication. Okay, so communication is so hard, is so impossible, in part because, and this is the first thing I just want to acknowledge and just name, is that we will only ever experience this world, you will only ever experience this world through your eyes. You will never understand what this world looks like through my eyes, and we will never understand what this world looks like through the eyes and through the mind of the person sitting next to you. I don't care how great a relationship you have, I don't care how talkative you guys are to each other. I don't care whether you've read that person's diaries. Like, it doesn't make any difference, right? Like, you will never see it through anyone else's eyes. And that's important because we actually don't think that way. We think that we think we all kind of share this one mono lens. We don't talk about it that way, but that's sort of how we tend to act. And there are a couple things that I want to just sort of name. So one thing is, we think what we say is so important. We work on like, you know, how do I frame this? How do I say this? And those things are important. But there's an important sort of study that was done in the 1960s that I'm going to put in sort of context because it's misused a lot of times. And you may have heard it if you've ever been to a conference in the last 40 years. You may have heard this data being mentioned. But Dr. Morabian did a behavioral study back in the 1960s. And the behavioral studies, he had this fundamental hypothesis, which was like, basically this question of like, I wonder why people like each other. Like, I wonder what it is. What's going on? And so he had these actors, and he threw these actors out in the street. Well, not literally, but he like had these actors go out in the street, and he had them like interacting with people in the street. I think there may have been a fair or something that he had done as well. I'll have to look back at the research. But he basically had people interacting with them. And then, you know, they would like bump into him and like, oh, hey, how you doing? And blah, blah, blah. And they would say something, and then they would leave. And then the researchers would come out and they would interview the person that they interacted with. And they said, what do you think about that guy? Do you like him? What do you like about him? And they found that only 7% of the time, the reason why someone liked someone was because of the content of what they said. 7% of the time. 55% of the time, it had something to do with what they called nonverbal communication. That's what I'm going to frame as like body language, right? Your essence. How you're being in the room, your body language. 38% of the time, it was tone of voice. 93% of the time, it's something totally different than what you're saying. And as an actor, I can tell you that this is absolutely, like, this is what actors like have to learn all the time because they get your script. If all it was just like reading the script, we just have a bunch of people up there going, yeah, no, it was a good day. Yeah, no, let's go to the mall. Yeah, it's like just be just all this like words, but it's not, right? You can say, wow, you look nice today. And you can make it sound really nice. Or you could say, wow, you look nice today. And you can make it sound really mean. And like the words are the same, right? And that's important for us, right? Because if content, which is really what we are constantly working on, right? Constantly thinking about, like, what do I want them to know? What do I want them to do? What do I want to say here? What are they saying to me? Like, we're constantly focused on it. If content is actually not what we are mostly responding to, then we have a real problem. We're having conversations, as I like to say, we're having conversations that we're not aware of. Now, this is the correction I want to make about this data. This data does not mean that content doesn't matter. A lot of times I hear communications experts and they're like, well, see, content doesn't matter. And it's like, no, content matters. If I ask you what time it is, I don't really care your body language and your tone of voice. Like, I just want to know, what time is it? Just tell me the truth. Look at your watch, tell me the time. If you say, boppity boop boop, like, I'm not gonna be very happy, right? So content does matter. It's just when it comes to like this relational piece, when it comes to like, how do I feel about you? How am I connected to you? Do I trust you? Content is less important than we think it is. How about that? Less important than we think it is. And if you're like a super nerd about this kind of stuff, you can look at Sandy Pentland, who's a MIT professor. He does a lot of social media research. So he's been doing all this big data research on Facebook and stuff like that. And he did some he had a question about this. So he hooked a bunch of people up to like all these sensors and was like, and sort of in creating all this data about their communication. And he came up with some really nerdy findings, basically saying that there's this really strong correlation between outcomes in negotiations and what he called social alignment, which just means, in my interpretation of reading the data, is like, that basically means like, are we aligned physically? Are we communicating in other ways than just the words? Okay, so the first piece is just understanding that our emphasis and our leaning in on words is probably not helping. The second thing is that emotions are really confusing. They're super confusing. First of all, I bet if I polled you all are probably super good at this, but I bet if I polled most people in this room and I asked you, what are you feeling right now? People would be like, I don't know, I'm just sitting here listening to you. I'm not feeling anything. And like, we are having feelings all the time and we don't really necessarily know. Many people are not in touch with like, what are you feeling right now? That's a problem, right? Because as Daniel Goleman has taught us, and Daniel Goleman, if you don't know, is the author of Emotional Intelligence. It's a book came out in the 90s. It kind of like revolutionized how we think about intelligence, and he's a psychologist, he's a writer, he's done a lot of research on what is the role of emotions in leadership, and in that research, he has discovered that emotions operate on an open loop. What does that mean? That means that we think we're having a private emotional experience that's contained within me, and you think you're having a private emotional experience that's contained within you. And in fact, it's like permeating throughout the room like some kind of bad perfume at a Macy's, countertop, like just all over there. And he knows this because he did this study where he put two people in a room together, like some sort of, I have this image in my mind of what this room looks like. It's like some white room with like no windows and there's a bench on it. He put these two people in the room. One person, let's just say one person was super agitated and one person was super calm. And he made them sit next to each other without talking to each other. There's no other distractions in the room. They just had to sit there like at a park bench. And they sat there, and after 15 minutes, whichever emotion was the stronger emotion, they both started to express it. He did the study over and over and over again, and he was able to like repeat this thing. Was like, what is going on? And we don't know exactly, I don't know exactly what's going on. I don't know if somebody has figured this out since then, but we do have like some information about brain science that tells us there's something going on. There's these things called mirror neurons in our brains. The mirror neurons are responding to and trying to align with whatever it sees out there. So this is like micro expressions being picked up in ways that we can't really understand, or I'll just explain it in like a magical term. Something is happening and it's happening out there, and if you're not aware of it, it's a problem. Why is it a problem? Why is it a problem? Because if I'm out there in the hallway, getting ready to do this talk, and I feel great. I feel fine. I feel super excited. And I step in here, and all of a sudden I feel super anxious. That's not me. That's not me. But I'm going to be confused because, remember, I only see the world through my lens, right? So I'm going to walk in here, and what is my mind going to do immediately when I start feeling anxious? What is my mind going to do? It's going to analyze it, and it's going to find fault with something that I'm going to do. Oh my God, I'm not really prepared. Oh my God, what if the microphone doesn't work? Oh my God, what if my mom's in the audience? My mom was a second grade teacher, so it's an actual reality that could happen. So that kind of anxiety can create tension, and it's not even mine. And if I'm aware of this idea of an open loop, so this is, by the way, this is why communication is so hard, because we are actually bringing our emotions to other people without even knowing that we're bringing our emotions to other people, and thereby creating tension and confusion. If I'm angry, but I think I'm somehow suppressing that anger, I'm like, oh, I'm so good at suppressing my anger. Nobody can tell I'm angry. And maybe they can't cognitively tell. Maybe they're not aware that you're angry, but they're going to start to feel angry. And then they're going to start acting angry. And they're going to be like, what's wrong with that guy? I'm the one who's angry. So all right, so emotional loop. We have to understand that piece about, how these things go. And then there's this third thing, which when I learned about this, it blew my mind, and I hope you find it as helpful as I do. There's this program down in Harvard, a Harvard negotiation project, and Sheila Heen and Douglas Stone do this work around feedback and around understanding yourselves, and the two of them came up with this concept of situation versus character. And here's how this works. Everything I do, all my behaviors, everything I do is situational. You see me do something, and I'm like, well, I did that because this other guy did this thing. Same thing is true for all of you. Everything you do, all the things you do, and you honk your horn, you speed up at the light, whatever you do, it's situational. Something's going on in your head. But here's the interesting thing. Everything everyone else is doing, as far as I'm concerned, is character. You honk your horn at me, it's because you're a jerk. And if you think about that, that explains a lot, right? I mean, right now we're living in a time in this world where it feels like everybody is I am doing this thing because of this stuff that's going on around me, but you all are doing what you're doing because you're all jerks. And it's oh, man, we don't understand each other. We don't understand our own psychology. We can't grasp this piece. And the reason why I find this so useful, and I'm going to get to the solution later, but I'll just talk about this one piece, is that if I can swap lens for a minute, if I can look at the world through your frame just for a second. Obviously, I can never do that, but if I can just imagine, if I were in your shoes, this is not new stuff, right? This isn't the Seth Rigoletti, crazy idea here. This is something we've been talking about for centuries, all the way back to the Stoics probably. If I can put myself in your shoes, I might be able to be yeah, I probably would have honked too. Yeah, I was a little distracted and the light turned green and I waited a little too long, right? I can imagine why you honked. If I can do that, if I create some space internally and I can actually do that, that allows me to kind of calm down a little bit. Because when I think this is your character, then I'm judging you. And once I'm judging you, you have no hope to connect. This is all about connection, okay? The emotions, all the understanding about how we look at the world. Like that's all about understanding about how we disconnect. So situation versus character helps understand how, not only how we see ourselves, but also how other people see us.